This video comes with the same requisite spoiler warnings that any of my videos do. Should you want to learn about the events of 1000xRESIST on your own, you should do that before watching this video. But I know there are a lot of you who, like me, won't do that. I like to think a lot of you are like me, constantly hungry for the so what behind pieces of art, the meaning behind it all. So much that you might skip the text itself. If that's you, hey, stick around. This one's for you. That said, I would be surprised if I ruined everything for you. It's difficult for me to keep the entirety of 1000xRESIST in my brain. The more I am able to grasp a single part of it, another part is gone. One character's motivations solidify and another's fade from memory. I commit to remembering how two story moments converge and a third splits away. Even the memory of playing the game, as I have multiple times, is slippery. Chapter 2 of Sunset Visitor's first ever video game release, 1000xRESIST, places the player in the bedroom of a teenager named Iris. She's leaving home, packing her bag item by item, deciding what she will take with her. Her laptop, an easel, a metronome, her glasses, her stuffed whale. As the player looks at each item, Iris will comment on them, and the item will either disappear, now packed away for the journey ahead, or it will remain, to be left here in this apartment with her parents. After interacting with some of the items in the room, we'll be shown a memory of this apartment. Maybe it's the day that Iris and her family moved to this place. Or it's a birthday where she argues with her dad about wanting pizza instead of the Chinese noodle dish that her parents usually serve on her birthday for longevity. We see her standing outside her parents' bedroom while they argue about her behavior. Her mother calls her lazy, tells her father he needs to discipline her better. We see her mother being much kinder to another girl named Zhao, a schoolmate of Iris's, whose family also moved to Canada from China, but much more recently. In a way that might feel unsettling, we hear references to and see scenes of her parents in Hong Kong, where they were beaten by police for resisting during the very real 2019 anti-extradition protests. There are moments in this chapter that you will forget as you play. There's a hint, almost a revelation really, in this chapter that's hidden in plain sight. But I've seen many players surprised about this reveal at the end of the game. As you play, you can only take so much with you. Just like Iris doesn't have room for her stuffed whale plushie. Sometimes, you just don't fit in the backpack. Let me say now what I could wait to tell you till the end. 1000xRESIST challenges the player to question what we carry forward and what we leave behind. It is a story about memory and forgetting across generations. It is, at least to me, a story about what we fit in the backpack. Remy Sue and Pinky Lee are the creative director and narrative designer at Sunset Visitor, and in a first for this channel, they kindly sat down to talk to myself and my friend Kim about making 1000xRESIST. I'll be showing you parts of that interview in this video. If you'd like to see the entire interview, head over to ko-fi.com/MattHorton and set up any recurring donation. $1 or more will get you access to this interview, as well as a 2.5-hour spoiler cast that Kim and I did about the game on a new members-only podcast called Can't Put It Down. If you're a listener of Can't Let It Go, the podcast I do with my friend AC, it's that show, but all about video games. Links to the Ko-Fi page, the podcast, and everything else are in the description. Of course, the best support is simply watching all the way through this video and interacting with it here on YouTube. So if you can't donate, that's absolutely okay. When Kim and I sat down with Sunset Visitor, we kept asking these questions about the game that were clearly searching for meaning. I think that's a natural desire, but I also should have expected their answer.
Maybe I'll just offer that I think it was kind of our interest through and through to not offer too many clear answers. To offer up questions that the player could sit with. And because I don't think we have any answers either, and did not necessarily want to claim that we had any, or that there was a right way to read the game, or a right takeaway, I would say. But that, that being alive is hard.
1000xRESIST gives you multiple chances to observe an event or a person. It lets you approach a moment from different perspectives in an effort to let you process those events for yourself. The first of those perspectives that we are given is that of Watcher. Watcher and all of her sisters are clones of Iris, the All-Mother, who they view as both mother and deity. Watcher is both her name and her role, her function. There are many other clones of Iris called shells in the game's vernacular, but only Watcher and her 5 sisters are named like she is. There is Principal, their leader, Knower, who, among other things, maintains their society's archives. Healer is, of course, their medic, and Bang Bang Fire isn't named quite like the others, but her name does represent her role as security chief. And lastly, there's Fixer, whose function is exactly what it sounds like. The first thing that happens in this game, though, is that Watcher stabs Iris in the back. Like every other pivotal scene in this game, we will understand this moment more deeply again and again. But 1000xRESIST doesn't linger here, so neither will we. Immediately afterward, we see a scene we don't understand for a while, of Watcher speaking to a copy of herself with bandages around her eyes. And then we're dropped into a clearing in the orchard, the place where the sisters live. Knower is there waiting for Watcher, and she tells her that she needs to say goodbye. And not for the last time, Knower warns Watcher that there's no feeling worth getting incinerated over. Watcher enters a tunnel to a train platform, and along the way meets Healer and Bang Bang Fire, who both encourage her in their own ways. Healer lets Watcher know that she's there for her in her honest, disarming way, and Bang Bang Fire uses a flowery metaphor that doesn't quite make sense. These small interactions characterize all of these women very quickly. Watcher is young, relative to the others at least, and she doesn't know as much. Knower lets on that she knows more about how the world works, but also that she's fiercely protective of herself and her sisters. Healer comes off as the sister you can always talk to, no matter what. And Bang Bang Fire, despite her role, values harmony, and kind of reminds me a bit of that one crystal-obsessed friend that we all have. On the train platform, Fixer is waiting for Watcher. The scene is short, and it's not particularly visually dynamic, but the dialogue packs an emotional punch. Fixer is leaving. In this society, when a sister has fulfilled her purpose, the All-Mother will call for her by sending a train to the other side. That sister will leave, and another shell will graduate to take her place and her function. When this Fixer leaves, there will be another. But this Fixer has a connection with Watcher. They lean against the wall together, talking about everything except the fact that they'll miss each other. There is a deep, and I believe intimate, connection between these two. But Fixer can fix anything but her own avoidance. Fixer gets on the train, and the train leaves. The next thing we know, Watcher is sitting in a classroom, bathed in red light. Up to this point, we've been shown 2 things about Iris: the reverence her daughters hold for her, and her murder. Through a series of communions, immersive, lifelike explorations of memories, we learn more about Iris, the society she built, and the reason it exists in the first place. Watcher participates in these communions with one of her sisters each time. First with Principal, then with Bang Bang Fire, then Healer, then Knower. And they are enabled by these strange cursor-looking familiars that hover over Principal's and Watcher's shoulders. Watcher's familiar is named Secretary, and he's sort of her guide through the communions. He speaks with the voice of a young boy.
They're irrespective of function. Curious.
Actually, now is probably the time to tell you that the voice acting in this game is very strange, but also, I think, very good. If you're not expecting it, it can sound understated or empty. But especially with characters like Secretary and Zhao and Healer, I find that the quieter delivery is more realistic. Secretary is rarely projecting, really only when he needs to. More often than not, there's this rasp or wisp in their delivery, and it serves to characterize him as he accompanies Watcher through her communions. The first of these communions takes us to a memory of Iris's high school, or rather, it's 2 memories. One takes place at an unsaid time when Iris and a handful of people in strange full-body militaristic outfits are visiting the school. The other is years before, in 2047, on the day of the school dance, right after enormous red aliens have appeared in some places on Earth and a new contagious disease has begun to take hold. You run around these environments separated by an unexplained amount of time as Watcher, But the characters you speak to in this communion perceive you as Iris. And listen, I promise we'll get back to the aliens, but let's just take this one step at a time. What we're watching in 2047 is essentially the last day of school before the world shut down. Unless you're too young to be watching this, then you'll remember this moment from the second week of March 2020. Only the disease at hand here is not the one we know well at this point. Instead, it is a sickness that makes you cry. And once you start, you can't stop until all of the fluid has left your body. As you walk around the school in 2047, you'll encounter plenty of kids crying or trying not to cry. But you'll also find plenty who are excited for the school dance, or are participating in their school club, or just being mean to each other in the way that teenagers are. There's one very funny scene with a boy who goes on a long rap about being in detention that's one of the funniest moments in a game that can otherwise be really dour. It's not the last time the game will be funny either. Hell, in the same chapter, we see a giant sentient pigeon with no real explanation as to why or how it exists. The school is also where we're first introduced to Zhao. Zhao looks up to Iris. She's trying to be like her, to dress like her. She tries to relate over their similar backgrounds, but Iris doesn't speak Mandarin and doesn't want the connection to her parents' home. Frankly, Iris is rude to Zhao. Awful, really. Walking through the halls, we hear rumors that Iris said something terrible about Zhao, but what that was, we never learn. In the other timeline, there's also no love for Iris. She has visited the school again, years after the school dance, with a few members of the 50. We'll learn in the next chapter that the 50 are a group of people trying to save the world from this deadly disease, and they want Iris to come with them because she's immune. Every time you talk to them in this chapter, though, it feels like they hate her, and they have a good reason to be upset. Iris is immune, but they're not, and they're pissed that she's brought them back here, especially since this particular place is so dangerous. On the night of the school dance, one of the aliens, one of the Occupants, showed up at the school, and everyone who was there died. Everyone except Iris. Whatever it is about the Occupants that causes this sickness, something about it is concentrated here. At least that's what these characters believe. The 50 believe there might be something to learn here about the disease, some knowledge that might unlock immunity. But Iris is here for another reason. Seemingly, Iris has come only to pay her respects to Zhao. A lot of what I'm saying is my interpretation of events after several discussions with friends who've played the game and with Remy and Pinky from Sunset Visitor. So I'll point you back to Pinky's quote from earlier. But something else happened at the school dance. In a scene where Iris is chasing Zhao through the streets during or after the dance, it seems that Zhao has learned about what Iris told people about her. Zhao has a journal she's always writing in. Maybe it was something Iris read. Maybe it was something about Iris, even. But whatever it is embarrassing enough that Zhao runs away from the school, and in the middle of the street comes in contact with an occupant. Despite her initial disdain for Zhao, Zhao's death affects Iris deeply. Throughout the rest of the game, Iris is seen talking to a photo of Zhao named Picture Zhao, and it talks back to her. I'm still unclear if this is something literally happening, or if it's some kind of magical realist storytelling tool. But in any case, Iris regrets her treatment of Zhao and mourns her death. Before Watcher can leave the communion, she runs into someone unexpected. Fixer has infiltrated her communion with Principal, and she's there to tell her that things on the other side are not what they were told. Instead of fighting the occupants, Fixer says the All-Mother whispers to an occupant. Unlike your typical video game protagonist, Watcher doesn't take this information and go on a self-righteous mission to save her world. Instead, she calls Fixer a traitor and reports the details of their conversation to Principal before they exit the communion, dooming Fixer to incineration. Between each communion, we get a chance to explore the orchard as Watcher. In the first one, we learn a bit about how the sisters feel about her reporting Fixer. Healer, for one, is furious. The second communion is with Bang Bang Fire. This is the chapter I told you about at the beginning, where Iris is packing her bag to come to the orchard with a 50. These two people, covered in full-body military gear and huge imposing masks, show up at her family home and ask her to come with them, because she's immune. Her parents understandably don't want her to go, but Iris won't hear it.
At no point does she express the feeling that, Mom, Dad, I have to go do this because, like, I could save the world. Like, this is important to me. Iris just wants to get the fuck out, and this is her ticket out.
One interesting thing to note is that we never get the impression that Iris's parents are sick. We see them live in their apartment for years, her mother in denial, convinced that Iris will return. We see them make videos for Iris to watch in case she ever does return, and we see her mother return to their apartment after going out to find supplies. But we don't see them worried about getting sick, and we don't see them cry. Later on, the game will pretty clearly tell us that her mother is also immune to the disease, but we don't see either of her parents suffering the way we see others. It's also worth calling out that in Watcher's Time, every clone is wearing these huge, elaborate masks. They don't eat solid food even, getting all of their nutrients from injections. So it's a pretty big deal for her to see other people, even in a memory, who don't die when they're exposed to the disease. Like I said before, this chapter is largely about Iris's relationship with her parents and her mother specifically. There is a haunting scene where Iris wakes up to find her mother sleepwalking, pounding on the window to their apartment balcony, and very clearly dreaming of the abuse she and Iris's father experienced at the hands of the police in Hong Kong.
This chapter has some very, like, scary almost scenes depicting Clara's sleepwalking, where you come out of your room as Iris, and Clara is kind of like standing at the glass door of the apartment, like banging on the door. And to this day, those scenes are like so disturbing to me, and so it's just like sad, because what you find out is that this is a symptom of PTSD that she experiences from the time in her life when she was involved in the protests.
Yeah, and I mean, we said all spoilers all the time, but like this is something that we see Iris do, right?
Mm-hmm.
In chapter 7, when we learn much more of what was going on with her. But it's also
Yeah.
something we see Principal do.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, the game is like on its sleeve a game about, generational trauma. And one of the clearest representations of that is from Clara to Iris
Mm-hmm.
to Principal.
From Clara's mother to Clara to Iris
Yes.
to Principal. I mean, we especially in this chapter, they put a very fine point on it by showing you the moment that Iris left home and the things that her mother said to her in that moment. And then later on, towards the end of the chapter, you're seeing the moment Clara left Hong Kong and the things that her mother said to her, which are in many cases verbatim what Clara then says to Iris, and is almost certainly, I think we can interpret as not intentional on Clara's part, but it is, I think the game raises questions of like, are we fated to just repeat these cycles?
I think it's impossible to fully comprehend 1000 times resist at any one time, but should you desire to try, you will need to consider this game's connections to Hong Kong. It is, for example, no coincidence that narratively the game begins in 2047, the year Hong Kong's status as a special administrative region of China is set to end. 1000 Times Resist is by, for, and about Hong Kong, Chinese, and broader East Asian diasporas. Some of the best writing that I've read on the game is by Castell on Co-Host, in a piece titled 1000 Times Resist is a game for a post-2019 Hong Kong protest generation of diaspora children that doesn't exist yet. Castell is Chinese-Indonesian, and their writing on this game is the kind of writing that I aspire to do. In fact, in some ways, their thesis rhymes with my own.
I don't think anyone, let alone me, can articulate what the game is trying to do because Hong Kong is still with us. Iris hasn't been born yet. We have to wait until 2047, when Iris is a high school student wondering what the hell Jiao wants from her, for the game to make sense.
Watcher's communion with Healer is essentially a fairy tale. It's the story of the Ancient Sister Sin, a cautionary tale told to the clones about why the All-Mother left them for the other side. It's the story of Youngest, a sort of prototypical Watcher from the first generation of clones. That this is a communion with Healer is notable. The thing about Healer is that I believe she knows as much about what's really going on as Knower does. But whereas Knower uses that knowledge as a tool for self-preservation, Healer is, I think, much more understandable in wanting something to be done about it. She's the one that shows Watcher a very clearly doctored series of memories that are more myth than they are reality. So she opts not to watch the rest of them, abandoning Watcher within this communion rather than putting up with it. Challenging Watcher to report her to Principal too, to either show remorse or consistency. At the beginning of this communion, we see the 50 bring Iris to the orchard, and it's said that she feels a freedom here that she's never felt before. We see the 50 begin testing on her. The first iteration of that scene is harmless, but the next one is sinister. Large portions of it are redacted, and one of the 50 is curled up in a corner repeating a mantra of their commitment to the cause. Someone doesn't want Watcher to know what these experiments entailed. The 50 managed to clone Iris, and she doesn't like the clones at all. The rage between Iris and the 50 grows and grows. The invisible narrator describes them as emotionless, disinterested automatons. And in another heavily redacted scene, somehow Iris kills the 50 and all of the clones they've made of her. Alone, she begins to imagine a new world, and she plucks a hair from her head and makes her own clones. These are those first 5 sisters, and they are immune. That means no masks. The blue sister, Youngest, doesn't fit in. She's made fun of by her sisters, and she seeks her mother's favor. And that's when she discovers a piece of Zhao's hair in the journal that Iris brought with her. So for Iris's birthday, Youngest creates her own clone, something that is explicitly forbidden by Iris. Only this clone is not another Iris clone. It is a clone of Zhao. And at Iris's birthday party, Youngest presents a deformed Zhao clone to Iris as a gift. Iris takes the knife meant for her cake and kills the Zhao clone in front of everyone. As the story goes, Iris proceeds to take immunity from every sister, leaving them to die. She leaves for the other side, but not before daring Youngest to make her own clones from her own hair, until she's paid for her great sin. A chapter from now, after Watcher stabs Iris through the back, we'll learn what became of Youngest. As Iris is lying on the ground, bleeding out, another train arrives, and Principal gets off of it. Iris calls her Youngest before she dies. So the tale of the ancient sister's sin is not a history of the founding of the orchard or a trustworthy retelling of the origins of the All-Mother. It is instead the story of a daughter and her abusive mother. It's clearly important to Principal. It is, for her, the explanation of her actions that founded this latest iteration of society in the orchard. And it is a limited attempt to explain how Iris, a rebellious teen eager to leave her demanding parents, became a mother, even angrier than her own. I told you we'd get back to the aliens. The Occupants are spoken of in several different ways. A boy in Iris's high school who caught one of them on video talks about the giant red headless beings, like an 8th grader talking about something he saw on a problematic YouTuber's latest video. They feel most dangerous when they're seen up close, like at the school dance, in the streets with Zhao and Iris, looming in the distance outside Iris's parents' apartment, or in various scenes sitting atop tall buildings or wildly shuffling down the streets. The shells in the orchard are fearful of the Occupants, but they talk about them the way that evangelicals talk about the devil. They don't feel quite real. So when alarms in the orchard sound and the inside sky becomes one giant red occupant alert, I'm left to wonder how real the attack is. Either way, it causes chaos. The shells evacuate into the tunnels. New Fixer, newly graduated to fill the function of her predecessor, is killed in the rush below ground. Several shells are killed, actually. But when Watcher finds Knower in a strange room with a horse statue, Knower tells her they should get on with the communion, despite the absurdity of the timing. The Occupants have a strange way of speaking. There is an us with a pattern we are threading. There is a nearness, and its gravity is echoing. They speak in these riddle poems that clearly mean something, but it's not clear what. Watcher's communion with Knower teaches us a bit about what these phrases mean. Watcher is dropped into a cave filled with things we've seen elsewhere in the game. Characters from Iris's school show up in strange ways, repeating things we heard them say before, but in a new context, with a backdrop of an artist's rendition of some memory of the Occupants. We've seen moments of this influence before, but chapters 3 and 4 are where I think we see the most obvious influence of the developers' prior time working together in theater production. Remy and Pinky were both members of Hong Kong Exile, an interdisciplinary arts company that has created works like Room 2048, Foxconn Frequency, and No Foreigners, which explore many similar themes as those explored in 1000xRESIST. But in this case, I'm really talking about blocking, sets, staging, and camera angles. Each backdrop is a scene with a large central figure in the middle of a theoretical stage. It might be an occupant, or the giant face of a weeping girl, or simply two giant suns orbiting each other. There is a star and a dangerous gravity. The occupants, or maybe an occupant, came to Earth, leaving some dangerous dual-sunned place behind, and when they arrived, they put some kind of protective barrier around the planet. They attempted to make themselves look like humans, and they tried to speak to humans, but when they did, it sounded like riddles, so they gave the humans a gift to help them understand. They chose to stay here, and something about their presence brought on the disease that killed everyone except Iris and some number of others. Among those immune, Iris was special still. Her immunity was her own, but she was chosen by the occupants to be immortal. All that Watcher has ever known is that occupants are the enemy. They are dangerous, and they are what brought the sickness that ended life on the surface. But the reality breaks her. The All-Mother is not on the other side fighting the enemy. Instead, this place exists because Iris made a deal with an occupant. They gave her immunity. They helped her murder the 50 and the clones they made of her. And they provided 3 gifts, 3 familiars, Secretary and their siblings. This revelation that Fixer wasn't lying, that Iris does in fact whisper to an occupant, that Watcher's familiar came from the occupants, causes Watcher to lose it. As Secretary screams that he didn't know, Watcher smashes him to pieces and boards a train to the other side, intent on killing the All-Mother. She stabs Iris in the back with a broken piece of Secretary, and only when Principal arrives does she realize that she's been set up. Principal, the daughter of a violent mother, convinced Watcher, lied to her, so that Watcher would do the work of killing Iris. She could blame the murder on a traitorous sister and walk away with clean hands. She could get her revenge for the way she was treated as a child. There's this scene early in the game where, after Iris's parents have survived the protests in Hong Kong, they stand outside an airport talking to Iris's grandmother. She calls her daughter foolish, says that once they leave, she'll finally get some sleep at night. She shows a concern for her daughter's well-being, but she can't help but scold her for things like waiting until they arrive in Canada to buy a coat. Iris's mother doesn't react. "Okay, Mom," she says. "Bye."
Time, because we cannot shed our baggage in our lived time. Like it takes generations to kind of clear through some of that stuff, and so it's just the elephants are all just sitting in the room. And how do we move forward together with that in the room, I think is something that we were always trying to chase when writing 1000xRESIST.
Iris's mother is named Clara. We never learn her father's name, but I think Clara's name is important to know right now. Clara lived in Hong Kong in a time where her freedoms were being stolen from her. Her mother didn't support her or the man that she met while protesting the loss of those freedoms. Her mother saw resistance as nuisance, the troubles of children. Iris lived in Canada with her parents. Despite her anger at her parents for leaving Hong Kong, she valued her Canadian cultural expectations over those of her parents' culture. While she lived with them, she had more freedoms than her parents did, but she resented them for leaving, for giving up. She felt they ran away from the problem rather than stay and fight it. Her mother saw her as lazy, disrespectful, and troublesome. She berated her, both to her face and to her father. When Iris was offered a chance to leave, she obviously took it. Up to this point, we've viewed each character from the limited perspective of what Principal wanted Watcher to see. Despite having access to perfect, immersive memories, we've had major portions of those memories redacted by a scorned daughter with an ulterior motive. We have seen many generations of trauma compounding on each other, and there are more to come.
I remember saying, like, oh yeah, we're going to have a Kingdom Hearts 2 moment in Chapter 6. Where it's like you start Kingdom Hearts 2 and you're just like, who am I playing? Like, what's going on? Like this feeling of like playing the beginning of Kingdom Hearts 2 and being like, who are these people? What am I playing? Like, what is this?
Blue didn't grow up with Watcher, but she did grow up with a legend of what Watcher did. Blue's world is not broken into shells with names and those without. Her name is not a function. Hell, she didn't even have a name until recently. She, like many other of her sisters, was simply known as miscellaneous, representing her lack of colors, or defined function. Blue is named after a special mix that her friend and employer Bartender used to make. The Blue Communion, a mix Bartender made for Watcher back in the day. She chose her name after Bartender was murdered by the Red Guard, Principal's police force that patrols both Old Town and the upstairs. The High Minister, who Watcher knew as Knower, tried to spin it as a suicide and threatened Blue if she chose to keep pushing. Then she gave her Bartender's old job, mixing at the bar upstairs. Chapter 6 has taken us several years in the future. The world is obviously different, but this is just the world after the one that we knew. Principal, once a quietly plotting but generally loved leader, is now a full-on dictator, complete with abusive police force led by the High Minister. The social structures that were implicit in the previous society are concrete in this one. Those who live downstairs in Old Town have freedom, sure, to discover their own function and to take on a name. But they live below the orchard, down through tunnels, in an old forgotten facsimile of a city from before. They're not allowed upstairs. In Old Town, there are sisters who still worship Iris as the All-Mother and believe that through cloning, they can recreate her genetics perfectly. There are also Chris and Athena, sisters who run an illegal smuggling ring for solids. They provide for sisters who want to eat real food, rather than living purely on injections. They saw Iris's death as a chance to free themselves from the limitations of the previous society. So when Blue, one of their old collaborators, is granted access upstairs, they see this as an opportunity to tell her to find one of their contacts when she gets there. When Blue gets upstairs, it is obvious that the people in the orchard live differently than she does. The way the ministers both praise and patronize her for being a miscellaneous who made it upstairs reminds me of the people that I've known in the past who seem to want a gold star for treating me like a human being even though I was gay. What's crazy is that you would think that winning the social lottery to make it upstairs would mean you're just another person in the orchard, equally as privileged as the next one. But we know how it goes. The class delineation doesn't stop at Old Town versus Orchard. Since we last saw the place, Principal has started cloning Zhao again. And these Zhaos are an entire cast of service clones, who only seem to exist to play tour guide in Principal's grand shrine to the All-Mother. They have names like Toffee, Cherry, and Candy, and they all speak in these hilarious sing-songy voices that do very little to hide how much they hate their jobs.
Very long ago, before incineration became popular, put in the ground.
Candy is Chris's contact. Blue provides her and a couple other Zhaos a code word, and they tell her to head to the bar, perform her function, and wait. It's a busy day at the bar, the anniversary of the All-Mother's death, and there's a big play being put on that evening reenacting it. People shuffle in and out of the bar all day, and an older shell named Doreen strikes up a conversation. Through coded language, she insinuates that she's been sent there to meet Blue. The shells who were there back in Watcher's Day, before Iris died, have begun to be eliminated, the way that Bartender was. They want to save themselves from Principal and the Red Guard. Doreen provides Blue with an activator and tells her to expect 2 more visitors. Later, a fanatic named Fiona arrives to the bar with a box including a cake. The fanatics want to clear the way for Iris's return. The cake is a prop for the play, which takes place on Iris's birthday, but the cake is also the body of a bomb. Later that evening, the High Minister's right hand, the second in command of the Red Guard, comes to the bar. This is Capital Red, who we'll later also know as Mauve. Mauve is straightforward. She brought the explosive. She sees any connection to the past as weakness. She wants to move past a reverence for Iris as a god. The bomb is a way to eliminate all ties to the previous world. The ministers, the High Minister, Principal, the legend of the All-Mother's murder. She doesn't give a shit about Blue or the older sisters or the fanatics. They're all just convenient tools to achieve her desires. When Blue's shift is over, she heads down to the stage. Cherry Jow is there, and she thanks Blue for being there with her, even if they are about to die. Cherry and Blue settle into the crowd, and the play begins. 1000xRESIST performs a particular kind of storytelling magic by being extremely thoughtful and somber, but also being funny amongst the sadness. The Jows are very funny, but their predicament and their desires are serious. And a bombing at a play is a serious matter, but the cast and the production of this play feel like Sunset Visitor poking fun at their own experience in the theater. The shell playing Watcher is overdoing it. She speaks like an inexperienced high school actor playing a Shakespearean villain but having never seen any Shakespeare. The person playing Iris is convinced that she's better than anyone here. She played Watcher last year and she has more experience. But when they're on stage, she delivers her lines like a robot. She's got no stage presence. She forgets her lines. Having known this exact kind of person is incredible. I couldn't help from laughing. The play is also very much a dramatized version of the events that we've seen multiple times at this point. Play Iris and Principal, who is playing herself in the scene, have a full conversation as Play Iris dies, a conversation that did not happen when real Iris died. It feels like Principal justifying her own actions and writing fanfiction about her life. Play Iris tells Principal that her final wish is that she and her sisters stay in the orchard and not venture out. She tells Principal to lead the others. She tells her that all she is in Principal now. And then Principal tells Play Iris to call her youngest. They have not rehearsed this, but Principal urges her to say it. She tells her to say she missed her, that she's sorry. She begs Play Iris to call her a good girl, to forgive her. It would be funny if it weren't so sad. After the bomb goes off, Blue wakes up. Cherry lies dead next to her, but before she can take even a moment to realize she survived, a familiar friend arrives with a new voice. Secretary, with one of his corners broken off, and the voice of a teenager, gives Blue a literal, "Hey, listen," and gets her moving. As Blue runs to the train station, the Red Guard chase her, and she begins to see visions of Hong Kong. The journey is confusing. Scenes of the orchard mixed with scenes in the streets, and both are filled with smoke, violence, and police. Blue sees Iris's mother and father in full gas masks and goggles. The tunnels to the train are filled with people and objects from the Hong Kong protests. Demonstrators hold their signature umbrellas and point the way down to the train. Blue encounters a room in the tunnels full of umbrellas with one single police officer. Not Red Guard. Something is wrong. Reality is mixing with memory in a way that doesn't make sense. When it seems like Blue has been caught by a red shell, that shell is shot by someone Blue can't see. Bang Bang Fire has saved her, and she gets her onto a train. When Blue gets inside, she meets Fixer. Either Fixer is part of what's wrong with Blue, or Fixer never died to begin with. Secretary says something about being in here too long and says he'll reboot the communion. The screen fades to black. Watcher is dying. After she killed Iris, Nowhere brought her to a holding cell, where she was kept for several years until her sisters rescued her. Ever since then, she's been deep in communion, reliving her own memories and Iris's over and over again. It's obsessive, and it's killing her. All those strange visions we've seen. Watcher talking to a wounded version of herself in a flooded orchard. Iris's original clones burning. The protests in Hong Kong mixing with Blue's escape to the train. These were a communion. The whole game thus far has been a communion. Watcher has been showing Blue everything she believes she needs to know to change things, and learning from her what's happened since she's been gone. When Blue wakes up on the constantly moving train where Watcher, Healer, Fixer, and Bang Bang Fire have been living, Healer warns her that another communion could kill Watcher. You heard that right. Fixer's not dead. As far as I can tell, when Fixer supposedly hacked into Watcher's first communion, that was actually Principal. And Principal never had any communication with the All-Mother, much less a way to have her incinerate Fixer. But that doesn't mean that Watcher and Fixer got their happy reunion. Despite Watcher being on the brink of death, Fixer won't talk to her. No matter how much Blue or her sisters plead with her, Fixer is solely focused on finding a way to free them all and return to the world before. Her connection to Watcher takes a backseat to the mission. These are the same women we met at the beginning of the game, but they've been changed. Watcher's sisters used to have to beg her to really see what she was being shown, to actually care about the absurdity of their situation and her behavior in reaction to it. Now, instead of living in the world they're currently a part of, Watcher's trauma has led her only to observe that trauma, again and again and again, in a way that's harmful to her and her sisters. Back when she left for the other side, Fixer was eager to understand how their world worked. She wanted to find a way to fight the Occupants, to restore immunity, and to return to the old world. Her rebellious, couldn't give a damn nature was endearing. Now, that same desire to fix problems is causing her to miss out on saying goodbye to the person she loves. When the train breaks down, she says her sisters are being too dramatic when they tell her Watcher is dying. She needs to focus on getting them moving again. Despite Blue's and Healer's protests, Watcher takes Blue into another communion. She lays out a plan to show everyone the truth, a plan we'll talk about later. And then, she takes Blue to a memory of Iris's family's apartment. Laying in Iris's bed, she says, "Isn't it strange? I've never actually been here before, but everything in my body tells me it's home." She thanks Blue and tells Secretary to end the communion and let her see her sisters. When Blue comes to, Watcher is gone. Healer and Bang Bang Fire are devastated, but Fixer arrives, still focused on the mission. There's no fixing the train. They need to get going. That's all she cares about, at least while her sisters are here. Right before they leave, Fixer has a moment alone with Watcher's body, and she says, "Don't worry, I won't let them touch you ever again." Then she sets the train on fire.
Iris is probably unaware that she longs for Hong Kong, but her unconscious longing after dealing with so much racist crap in Canada caused her to reproduce the violence when she tried to talk to Zhao or her daughters. She disciplines her daughters in the same way that her traumatized mother disciplined her. She can only emulate and teach the heritage she still remembers. She longs for a home that can truly accept her, but that home has vanished from the face of the earth. So Iris suffers. Her daughters suffer. They all suffer from nostalgia for Hong Kong.
The Iris we see at the beginning of the game is cold. We occasionally see her calm, but mostly we see her being mean to Zhao or straight up murdering people. Despite this, she is both mother and god to her clones. In Watcher's lifetime, Principal has built an exploitative religion around this version of Iris, complete with rituals and prayer and lies. Chapter 7 lets us see Iris as a mother. In between moments of Watcher being held in captivity and questioned by Nowhere for several years, she has visions of Iris. The clones Iris made to keep her company pretty immediately became a burden when she realized she had to treat them as children. We see her struggle with the duty of caring for them, while also meeting the requirements of her deal with the Occupants. She tries to hide the effect her communions with the Occupants have on her body. She does everything she can to protect her daughters, but she's also exhausted. Caring for Youngest specifically seems to bring her pain. Youngest has a lot of emotional needs, and as literally the only adult in her world, Iris has to fulfill almost all of them.
Particularly the scenes of Iris in Chapter 7 were really resonant for me and reminded me of this book by Amanda Monte called Touched Out, which it's named after the feeling of being touched out, which is a feeling not uncommon among parents of babies and toddlers. It's a sense of like physical overwhelm from receiving too much physical touch. And she describes that feeling in the context of also the feeling of physical and bodily oppression, sort of like socio-culturally and politically, especially upon childbearing people. And Pinky, you also mentioned earlier this feeling that society is sort of inherently violent.
We've seen Clara struggle with the same things. Her anger is present more often than Iris's anger, but it doesn't cause her to physically harm anyone the way Iris does. But it does do harm. You don't spend that many years yelling at your family that they're lazy and ungrateful and have them come out unscathed. The part of Clara we rarely see is who she was before Iris. We get these moments of her with Father or with her own mother sometimes. When she's with Father before they leave Hong Kong, she's headstrong, but she's passionate and caring. We see the things and people she cares about show up in her resistance. When we see her with her mother, we see her reserved. She doesn't put up the fight we know she's capable of. She seems resigned to disagreement. But ultimately, Clara and Iris suffer from the same things. They both have mothers who grew up in different circumstances and don't understand why they want different things. They both have mothers who verbally abuse them for not meeting their expectations. They both have daughters whose needs and behaviors are unexpected and difficult to account for. They both left a place they grew up in and simply could no longer stay. By the time we witness the last of Iris's memories in Chapter 7, Watcher has lost her eyes. Nowhere gouged them out with the same piece of secretary that Watcher used to kill the Allmother. In this memory, though, she can see the three familiars. She hears Iris speaking to the original sisters, trying to calm them down. Iris sounds tired. The sisters notice she is nervous. She has gotten them together for a special kind of communion, a mass communion. It's only possible when all three of the familiars are nearby, and it lets everyone in the orchard participate in a memory. She says she's going to show them a place that is special to her and to her mother.
But after a certain point in this game, I saw Hong Kong in everything. The game even encouraged it. I was running through corridors that reminded me of the videos people shot as they ran away from the police. I saw an interrogation that followed the same premises as Gui Minhai's forced TV confessions. Whether the player is reliving memories of Iris and her parents, or wandering through the hubs to find a purpose in life, the parallels are everywhere. Allmother looms over the horizon like China watching over Hong Kong's every move. The soldiers at Iris's school resemble the orange soldier clones patrolling the orchard, and the game's mothers are unable to connect with their daughters. These aren't just parallels. They are the continuation of a trauma that never ceased, and everyone is recreating the Hong Kong and China dynamic over and over again.
I have very little sympathy for Principal. The game is asking you to form opinions on who is forgivable and who is not. In fact, we have a chance to do that mechanically at the end of the game. What I continue to find after playing the game through twice and watching it several more times is that I cannot forgive Principal. So forgive me if I'm a bit harsh. Principal, youngest, can be seen as a traumatized young girl. You can look at her and see a girl who has disappointed her mother and, in response, did what was asked of her to win back that favor. You can look at Iris's neglect as understandably provoking Principal. Of course she would lash out. But it's how far she took her actions and how long she carried out that hurt that I take issue with. At the beginning of Chapter 10, the final chapter of the game, Principal explains herself. She talks about learning to edit memories to fit her needs, to remove ugly details and implant new ones, as she says. She talks about Watcher and how she reminded her of herself, how she picked her out explicitly to be manipulated. Principal outlines a history between Iris leaving the orchard and Fixer saying goodbye to Watcher on the train platform. She learned to clone herself, not Iris, and it took a lot of failed attempts. When she thought she had made the perfect clone, she sent her to meet her mother on the other side. This is a process that would eventually end up with Fixer being summoned, as we're told in the beginning of the game. The catch is, no matter how many sisters Principal sent, Iris never responded. What we know now is that Iris didn't respond because she was stuck reliving memories the same way that Watcher was. Out of obsession, yes, but also because that was the deal that she made with the Occupants. She traded with them for power and was being held to her part. Iris was neglectful. She wouldn't have left if she wasn't, but Principal thinks Iris ignores her gifts of clones intentionally, and I think she's just too out of it to even notice. To be clear, Iris is a bad mother. She traumatized and abandoned her child, and she straight up murdered a lot of people. Principal has every right to feel wronged by her. But in that same respect, Principal must also be held responsible for her actions. Principal built not one, but two societies built on lies and violence. She manipulated Watcher into murdering Iris. She oversaw the violence perpetrated in Old Town by Capital Red, Nowhere, and the Red Guard. She leveraged or maybe even faked an attack, I'm not really sure, on the orchard to establish an authoritarian regime that looked similar to the one her grandparents knew back in Hong Kong. Hell, she manufactured an entire cast of servant Zhao clones. Principal is a hurt little girl, but she's also an adult who hurt a lot of people herself. And in that light, the way she talks about her pain seems, to me, like an attempt to excuse her behavior. Whereas I think that in order for the world to move on, she, just like Iris, cannot. It probably feels obvious to say at this point, but Clara in many ways is her mother, and Iris in similar ways is just Clara. Principal is Iris, and of course, Watcher is Principal. Clara, Iris, and Principal all struggle with sleepwalking. Principal talks about dreaming of places she's never been and having sensations she's never felt. But let me say this. If Iris's pain was built on a longing for a Hong Kong she never even visited, then the same must be true of Principal. The places she's dreaming about, the sensations, how many of those are Clara's memories? Or her mother's? Where did the trauma begin, and who will be the first one to let it go? We've seen Watcher and Principal and Iris all hold on to hurt, never moving through it and never moving past it. Maybe this is what made Iris immune in the first place. Maybe the same can be said for Clara and for Principal. Maybe, when you don't know how to process trauma, a disease that forces you to relive your saddest moments until you cry so much that your body can no longer function, just won't have an effect. The nature of the disease at the center of the story is something that the game takes its time unraveling. In Chapter 9, we learn a bit more when we see the perspective of the 50, right after they brought Iris here, to this place. Actually, what is this place? What is the orchard? It turns out that the entire game up until now has taken place aboard a massive generation ship, deep in the ocean. It's a giant submarine, one of 50, built to give humanity time to figure out a solution to the disease that the Occupants brought with them, or at least to live a little bit longer. This is why the 50 were willing to experiment on Iris in an attempt to leverage her immunity, even if it caused her harm. We see the 50 on the bridge as their ship and the other 49 attempt to descend without being discovered by the Occupants. They have figured out that the Occupants not only cause suffering, they seem to be drawn to it. Someone in charge, who we only see referred to by their ship designation, Central 1, says, "Those sick fuckers love suffering so much, well, we're going to put on the best show they've ever seen," before sharing their plan to bomb the rest of the largest population centers on the surface. They're going to kill basically the rest of the living population of North America as a distraction for their escape below the sea. Central 1 lets us know that the rest of the world is doing the same. Before Watcher died in that final ill-advised communion, she let Blue in on a plan, and it relies on knowing how the Occupants work. They communicate through memory. This is why when we're first introduced to them, their verbal communication is so strange. They don't have a need to communicate that way because their recall isn't flawed like ours. They can relive experiences. This is what makes up a communion. Naturally, this raises questions about Secretary and the other familiars. When Watcher hurt Secretary, she inadvertently hit some kind of reset button, and he remembered everything. He and the other familiars are, themselves, occupants, branched off of the occupant that Iris made her deal with. Their job was to communicate her memories back to the occupant, and they're going to leverage that connection. The plan is to get to the other familiars, begin a mass communion, summon Iris's occupant, and merge Secretary back into that occupant. This comes with risk. Typically, the way this goes is that occupants merge with each other and cease to exist. Their memories are absorbed back into the whole, and they become one single being. Secretary assures Blue that they will prevent this. Fixer takes Blue, Healer, Bang Bang Fire, and Secretary to the area above the orchard's inside sky. They're walking on top of the ceiling over the orchard. Fixer's plan is to cut a hole in that ceiling that Secretary can fit down through and get outside Principal's office window, where her, Zhao Prime, and the other two familiars are. But right as they're about to do that, Capital Red comes up the elevator and starts shooting. Instead of cutting a small hole, Fixer blows the ceiling up and they all begin to fall. Secretary flies straight through Principal's office window and begins the communion. What follows is a small platforming section that you can hear more about in the Can't Put It Down podcast episode on the Ko-Fi, but at the end of that section, Secretary begins to merge with Iris's occupant. This is represented to us as a warehouse full of scenes on various stages throughout the space. We're guided through this warehouse by that occupant, now named Source, and shown the story of the game through the eyes of the occupants, how they learned to speak, how they took on the form of humanity, what their goals were here. As I've said many times, some things about this game are certain, but most are interpretation. Here's how I interpret what the occupants were doing on Earth. Source arrived to Earth because they sensed a wealth of memory, and when they arrived, they called upon other occupants to join them. Those occupants eventually got bored with Earth, but Source and a few others remained and tried to communicate with the humans. It's implied that humanity tried to use music to communicate, and something about that was harmful or annoying to Source. When they tried to use the same kind of signals to communicate back, it hurt people. But when it did, suddenly the occupants witnessed a flood of memory. And that's when they put something around the Earth meant to capture these memories. And in doing so, they created the disease. Secretary tells Source that they murdered these humans, but Source doesn't understand the concept of death. The transfer was lossless, they say, and I remain. Source developed a fascination with Iris. They say that she was an epicenter for heightened awareness. Again, my interpretation, but they were attracted to her trauma. So they picked her out, gave her the gift of immortality, and provided her the familiars in order to capture more and more of her memory. She had a gift and she kept giving. They basically saw Iris as a deep, rich well of sorrow that they could exploit, with more and more hurt etched into her genetic code. This way of seeing the harm they cause to humanity starts to fill out my picture of the occupants. Actually, they say that they refer to themselves as keepers, a word that expresses how they see their function: to find, obtain, and hold on to memory at whatever cost. If they kill an entire planet of people, but they harvest all of that memory, that was worth it. Besides, what is death when those memories reside within the keepers? Those people are now just part of this collective of memory, right? That's why it was worth extending Iris's trauma just to harvest the memory that came of it. Obviously not. In my eyes, the occupants are colonizers. And just like colonizers will steal an artifact, put it in a museum, and call it history, the occupants kill a person, take their memories inside themselves, and call it lossless transfer. Just like colonizers in the real world will extend a disaster or a war or a pandemic for their own gain, the occupants created a disease for theirs. But remember what I said at the beginning. 1000xRESIST is not only a game about remembering. It is a game about what we carry forward and what we must choose to forget. Holding onto every memory from every person on the entire planet is both impossible and dangerous. Some things just don't fit in the backpack. As Secretary moves to merge with Source, we are again shown the scene of Watcher stabbing Iris several times over. Secretary tells them that instead of merging, they will overwrite all of the memories Source holds. Source grieves the loss of Iris's memories, but Secretary tells them, Iris must be allowed to die, or nothing will change. Iris's memories flash before our eyes for the final time. Like some of my favorite science fiction media, 1000xRESIST manages to completely recontextualize everything you know about it every chance it gets. It does that in ways that rival some of the best. I played this game because it was compared to 13 Sentinels so often, and that's a game that shocked me with how sturdy it was under the pressure of constant twists and reveals. 1000xRESIST does this even better. The way it does that is by making these reveals meaningful, in the text of the story but also in our lived experience. From Iris's murder to Watcher ratting out Fixer, to Principal's lies, to Blue's resistance, to the Occupants' true desires, each new piece of information is both pulpy science fiction goodness and thoughtful science fiction commentary. And that is true of the game's final moment. The final communion ends with a choice. Secretary, now fully merged with their source, presents Blue with a collection of characters. It's time for you to decide what should stay and what should go, what future you desire. Looking out over a flooded orchard, Blue sees people she knows, each collection of them with a streetlight above their heads. There's Iris's mother and father, the Jows, the Red Guard, Knower, Watcher's sisters, Chris, Mauve, the older shells, the Fanatics, and Principal. Blue, or rather we, must go to each of them and decide whose light stays on and whose is turned off, whose memory will be brought forward into the world ahead. Some decisions were easy for me. There was no way I was going to turn off the Jow's light. They deserved a shot at an independent existence. Iris's parents, as flawed as they were, held memories of resistance that were fundamental to this place and, I imagined, would be important in the next. Chris, the Fanatics, and the older shells did nothing wrong. Obviously, Healer, Fixer, and Bang Bang Fire would be brought along. Mauve and the Red Guard could not be part of a world trying to move beyond the trauma of authoritarian police violence. In fact, if you try to choose complete pacifism, the game does something it rarely does and forces you to try again. Leave Mauve or the Red Guard's lights on and you'll awaken the orchard to be immediately shot and killed by them. As much as the game would like to only offer questions, there are simply some answers that are wrong. Now, I've told you my feelings on Principal. For me, there was no bringing her ways forward. The things she did were beyond forgiveness to me, no matter if they were brought on by the misdeeds of a bad mother. The real struggle I had was with Knower. Both Knower and Principal did so much wrong, but as much as I wanted to turn off Knower's light, I couldn't do it. I don't like her decisions, but she did everything she did for her sisters. She was wrong. Maybe her approach would doom the world ahead, but it was worth the risk. I made my decisions, and you would make yours. We can imagine what comes after, but we'll never truly know. The only thing we can do, the thing we must do, is forget and carry forward with purpose, knowing that some things must die. Some things just won't fit in the backpack. At the end of 1000xRESIST, I find myself wondering what I will carry forward. What memory will accompany me into my life? In a game that I find difficult to keep a complete picture of, what image will remain? I think it's this one. In the interrogation room, when Watcher is drugged and having visions, we see an extended sequence of Iris's mother and father going through the last of their alcohol. Because of Watcher's mental state and theirs, these scenes are set impossibly in various places within the orchard. The last of these is the two of them sitting in front of the statue of Iris, bottles strewn about the floor. Here, they finally have an honest conversation. Mother says she regrets leaving Hong Kong and wonders what any of their resistance was for. All it did was expedite the end, she says.
Brought their fists down harder, faster.
Come on, Clara.
We lost, didn't we?
It wasn't just about winning.
What? What was it about then?
You remember? In the streets? Hundreds of thousands marching shoulder to shoulder. biggest demonstrations in HK history. The world watched it all happen, heard our voices, saw us bleed.
So?
So, if we stayed silent, didn't stand up for ourselves, they would say, this is how it always was. They would say, this is what the people wanted. But no, they can't say that, because it has gone down in history that we resisted fiercely, that we fought for a different future until we couldn't.
Thank you for watching this video and for making it all the way to the end. Those of you that make it this far are the ones that I make videos for. Thank you also to my friend Kim for being a part of this project with me. If you want to see more of the interview that Kim and I did with Remy and Pinky from Sunset Visitor, or if you want to hear a deeper, spoiler-filled podcast about the game, head over to my Ko-Fi page at ko-fi.com/MattHorton and check out Kim's podcasts, Dotzip and Frog of the Week. You can find her shows and mine at theworstgarbage.online. I also want to say thank you to the members of the Worst Garbage Discord for your ongoing conversations about 1000 Times Resist. They were invaluable to creating this video. I truly appreciate your support, whether monetary or not. Thank you so much. Hecky Grace.